All right, we are back today for another episode of the Minnesota Due Process Coach. And today we have Diane here from Sped Forms, and I'm so excited for our first collaboration together to kind of talk about a variety of different things, and then also talk about a lot of the things that Sped Forms has to offer that maybe some of us don't know about. Or there's just things that are new and upcoming, and I think it's really important to share that information. So I am going to let Diane kind of talk about herself, everyone's favorite thing to do, right? But I think it's super important because Diane comes to Sped Forms with a huge wealth of knowledge and a recent amazing award from Mace. Congratulations again. Uh,
Thank you.
very, very cool. But I would love if you could kind of give us your background and then also like what you do at Sped Forms to kind of let everyone know like what your position is and what that looks like.
Okay. Well, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. So I am Diane McCarran. I just won from Mace the Distinguished Service Award, which is humbling and at the same time feels like it means I'm really old. It means I've been doing this a long time. And so I started back as a special education teacher back in well, we're not going to go there. We're just going to say a long time ago. And we actually did IEPs on NCR paper. So three levels of paper, pink, yellow, blue, and we had to write really hard. And then if you made a mistake, you had to start over on the paper and write some more really hard. And so about that time, there was a special ed director in a smaller co-op in Minnesota named Gary Lewis, and he and a friend, a technology friend, decided it had to be better than anything else that we had in the state of Minnesota to write our forms on. And he created Sped Forms at the time, and it was on floppy disks. And floppy disks were a thing. You might be too young to know what a floppy disk is, but every kid had a different floppy disk. And heaven help you when you gave it to someone who lost it because everything was lost, right?
Everything.
And every time there was a new change in the law, all those floppy disks were obsolete, but it was better than what we had.
This is true.
And then the internet came to be real for teachers. And so then Sped Forms went online. And so we started with five little districts, five little districts. And now we serve everybody but five traditional school districts in Minnesota.
What a
And you
weird
traditional
word.
districts out there, you know who you are, and we want to work with you, right? Because
And we want
we
you to
have
get Sped Forms.
we want you to get Sped Forms, and so do your neighbors.
Yes.
Because as kids move from district to district, and we know they're moving around a lot,
Hmm.
forms, the history, all of it, forms that you recognize, forms that you can just put your logo on are there for you, and you can make an amendment without having to retype an entire IEP into an entire new system. All of that student's history is there. It's brilliant.
Yes.
And also, we've got lots of platforms. We've got the 504 platform. We have the MA platform. We have a new MTSS platform, new and old. We can talk about that later. And we've got health forms. And so all of that history for that child is right there, available to whoever needs it, whoever has been given access to that student's history in your new district.
Right.
So it's amazing. So if a kid moved from Pipestone to Ely, right?
Yeah.
You've got all that information and you're not waiting. I've been around long enough to wait for all those paper copies, and then you got maybe part of it, and then the middle of the ER wasn't sent to you because it was on the back of a page.
Yep.
So, so I work for Sped Forms now for the last 5 years. Before that, I was a special education teacher. Then I became a coordinator, and then I was a director in Minnesota. So I've been around a distinguished amount of time.
You just have a lot of knowledge, which is very good and very important.
Well, knowledge some, but what I do have is I know who to talk to,
Yeah.
right? I know who to contact. I know who to call. And we have at Sped Forms the most amazing people on a number of our advisory groups. So it's not me making a decision. It's people submitting support requests,
Okay.
offering suggestions, and me facilitating that and taking that to our teams, appropriate teams, our 504 advisory group, our ECSE advisory group, our Minnesota advisory group, and having really in-depth discussions with perspectives from people from big districts, because we serve the biggest district in Minnesota. We serve the smallest district in Minnesota. We serve most of the charters in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So we get lots of perspective. We also reach out to, we're friends with the attorneys to ask questions, and we talk to MA monitoring and compliance.
Okay.
So we get the entire perspective. We are working really hard to make our forms compliant and appropriate and easy to use and not requiring too much stuff that isn't actually needed for our
Right.
teachers because we know they don't have the kind of time to be spending on extra things.
No. I like that you brought that up that you have those advisory councils and that you really rely on those support tickets because I think sometimes I forget that too is to submit those things that maybe are a suggestion or maybe a question and just things to think about when we're going through sped forms and things that we find bumpy or things that we find really good. So I think that's a good point that if you are using sped forms out there and listening and you have questions or you have suggestions to submit those because you do really look at them, it sounds like, obviously.
We have every single one that's ever been submitted online. They're all there. We're at 6,600, excuse me, 6,600 of them.
That's a
And
lot.
we keep them so that we can search back and look for patterns. Remember when we made changes? Look for things that people are interested in. And so besides all the suggestions, ideas, complaints, which are all fine, which are all good, we
Yeah.
also want to know what works for you. Like, what's your favorite thing? Throw that in a support request. So that's also tracked. Like, oh yeah, this is important to people. They talk to us about this.
Okay.
And so that's a great tool. Our advisory groups come from, we look at the MACE regions, and so we
Mm,
have people from all over the state. We don't just think metro, don't just think outstate. We think of everybody. And it's interesting, I will come in to our meetings. We meet with the Minnesota group twice a month,
mm,
and they're all virtual.
okay.
But we meet and I'll think, oh, I know how this is going to go. If this comes in with a support request, I'm going to share it and I know how this is going to go. And invariably, I will be wrong. After much, because there's just really good, robust discussion from
Right.
school psychs we have on the team, from directors we have on the team, from coordinators we have on the team, and
Okay.
all looking at all of their different perspectives. So we really are cognizant of Minnesota being a statewide company, that
Right.
we serve you all and we work hard at serving you.
That's really great. So how do people get on to these advisory councils that you're talking about? Are you guys finding and searching for these people, or are you just, people are coming to you? How would someone go about that for our listeners?
So we invite you
Okay.
essentially. We look at people that have submitted a number of support requests. We look at people that I meet at different conferences or at the MACE events.
Hmm.
We so and we track it so we know how many people are a part of the MACE region G and MACE region H. And so we have a percentage of directors or people from that district or from
Okay.
that region, I should say. So it matches. So there are more people from region H than there are from region A, just because of the amount of voices out there. I
Yeah.
guess we're kind of like the House versus the Senate.
Yeah.
Um, if I think about, I hadn't thought about it that way, but that's kind of the way it is. And we make sure we've got a school psych on our group. We make sure we have behavior people that are interested in the behavior analysts. So I manage that piece, if you will, and making sure we've got a really good balance of people that use sped forms and could bring an important voice to our table.
No, that's great. That's good
We
to
have
know.
some people that have been on the team for literally years, and that is important as well because they bring
Mhm.
a historical perspective. And then we have new people.
Mhm.
because that they bring a new perspective. We say every time we get a new district, we get better because they bring in new ideas and new expectations and new questions.
Yeah. No, that's great. I guess I've never submitted a question, so that's an interesting thought there.
Well, you have to be, your district has to give you the ability to do that. And we ask that districts don't have everybody open to support requests
Right.
because we want you all to sort of, in a district, to sort of funnel, see what kinds of questions are coming through because maybe it's a training piece for your district or
Hmm.
maybe it's something else. So if you're funneling it through one or two or three people, depending on the size of your district,
Yep.
that just helps you all as a district also know what's going on, know where there's concerns and questions.
Yeah.
So not everybody gets access to that, and that's by design.
Would you suggest people that if they do have those types of questions to go to say like their super admin or their Sped Forms administrator that they have in their district? Because I know some of
Yes.
the bigger districts are like that charter looks a little bit different, right? Because you have smaller teams and the build is different with how the director structure is. Um, but I would say I know from the districts I work in, there's a point person
Yes.
who holds that. So more or less like opening your questions to that person.
Exactly. Or sometimes there is that super administrator, and that's the person that's a role we have, super administrator. And they're the people that can go in there and change the templates, change the drop downs, change the preferences,
Yeah.
right? You don't want to have 5 or 10 people in your district making all those changes. That would be chaos for
Yeah.
your district. But there might be two or three, depending on the size of your district, there might be a coordinator in each building, for example, that's your point person. So figure out who's your point person, and then they should have those conversations and submit those support requests.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's a good point too, because today we're going to talk a little bit, some questions I have are around those templates and the drop downs and such. But just reminding our listeners, if you are like obviously a teacher or in a role that isn't a coordinator or supervisor or director, that you might not have the capabilities for those templates, but that doesn't mean that you can't talk to the right people within your district to see if those can get built for you. Because we've been building them in the districts I work in, and they are like life changing to have these templates and these drop downs for staff to easily just click through. And so it's faster for our teachers. It's more consistent across our district of what we're looking for. And we I hate to say control the narrative, but you can, right? We can control how
Mhm.
everything looks uniformly and what information is going out there.
Right, and the teacher voice is very important. We
Mhm.
get that. It's super important. But we need to have those teachers in the district talking up the channel, if you will, talking to their leadership to make sure that there's consistency because we know one teacher feels very differently than another
Yeah.
teacher. So we've got to come up with compromises and things that work for everybody.
Yep. So one of the questions that I got was, what are your top five drop downs you would recommend, if you could think of any, for districts? Like when you're thinking of that IEP process, what are those? It even could be like your top three too, like that you would recommend districts start looking at.
I would start with the prior written notices.
Yep.
And so we've built in a number of story starters, I like to call them. I feel like that's what those drop downs are. They're story starters, and you've got to flesh out those stories.
Yep.
We know that attorneys would say to us, the most important document that you complete is your prior written notice,
Yep.
right? And so we have story starters for a new evaluation. We have story starters for a reevaluation. We have story starters for an IEP. We had story starters when we had to do an oh please, right? We had to do the contingency learning plan back in
Yeah.
2020. We had story starters there for you. Um, but so that's a great place for people to look at you when you open your prior rent notice in that first question in that first drop down, there are story starters there and you can see all of them. Is there something that's missing? Is there something you'd like to add? Go to question number 2. And what's that story starter? or there are, multiple story starters. And so I would look at the prior written notice first.
Hmm.
And there are 5 questions there. And so 5 different drop downs. The second place I would look would be your in the IEP, your accommodations and modifications. Look at what those story starters look like.
Yeah.
Um, and then maybe I'd go to the LRE and look at what do those story starters look like and what do you want to help people prompt. The other thing that we have that is not a drop down, but we've got little blue question marks if you're using version 2.0, and we really hope you're using version 2.0. I know, change is hard,
It's hard.
right? We all have that muscle memory, but there are some really great things in version 2.0.
Yeah.
And so I would look at those just-in-time pieces of guidance that
Mm,
give you more information as well. Don't forget to click on the blue hyperlinks. Don't forget to click on the blue question marks because there's information in there that is also very helpful, particularly for those new teachers or for those very experienced teachers where things change. And so that is reflected in those just-in-time pieces of guidance.
okay. Yeah, I guess I've never clicked on those, so that's really I'm gonna have to look at that today. I feel like I'm a seasoned pro when it comes to sped forms, but like you said, when you're in that muscle memory, and I'm so used to like doing the clicks that I'm used to and running things the same way for how many years now that you don't always explore those extra pieces that are out there.
Right, and some of those extra pieces are linked to MDE,
Mm,
monitoring and compliance pieces of information. And as we know, things change. And so if there's an updated document, we relink it so that it's updated. And so I would, yeah, use those blue, again, question marks or hyperlinks.
okay. Yeah, so the other question was too, and this I'll kind of reframe it a little bit because I've noticed this is helping teachers understand that there are sped forms created drop downs and then there are district created drop downs. And one of the questions was how do you make it district and school wide? So distinguishing between like how the whole district sees it. And I know there's an ability for like the high school or the elementary, and they each have different
So
settings.
that would be that super administrator in your district.
Yep.
They can go in and build those drop downs and they
Hmm.
can indicate which schools they are for.
Okay.
So if they don't indicate different schools, it's going to be all district.
That's
But if
right.
they indicate different schools, that's what the people in different schools are going to see. And the drop downs that are created by the district for district or school are always at the top, and the sped forms drop downs are below that.
That's good to know.
And there are a couple, just a couple, where you might allow district teachers to create their own drop downs, like where is their IEP meeting being held? Because maybe you always do it in Johnson Elementary in room 507 on the second floor,
Okay.
right? Maybe so that's a possibility that your district allows that, and then you as an individual can build your own. But that's one of the very few cases where you do that.
Okay.
And then of course that would be at the top.
Okay. So the other question I got was around progress reports. And so there is the ability to make templates in most of, not all of your documents. I know for a fact I've made them for valuation reports. That's a separate piece. And then I've made templates for present levels in the IEP so that my teachers just pick the one that fits them. I have an elementary, middle, and a high school one. And
Mhm.
so just a plug out there for everybody, they're absolutely fabulous because then your teachers just click the template, everything loads for them. And like I said before, it's just super consistent. And they just plug their information in where the X's are. And obviously, like you said, those story starters. So
Yep.
really, they just have to fill in those pieces, which I think personally has helped because now things are more consistent across the board. Um,
And I think that consistency helps in compliance. And that
yes.
consistency helps when that kid moves from one case manager to another. Like, oh, I can read this and understand it because it's written in the same way I wrote my present levels of performance.
Yes. Right. Or, I mean, like maybe I should try this next time because that does look really good and the way that I've been doing it,
Right,
versus
right.
Um, I've got to read it here because I'm not, we'll see if we can answer this. This one, he's so funny. Um, he's saying, can they please change progress reports so rather than add objectives to the PR, it will also add a statement above starting with goal progress student is currently able to. This sounds like he needs to submit a ticket,
This sounds like a ticket. Yeah.
right? I'm gonna make him submit a ticket. He has super admin.
Excellent. Perfect.
I think it's so hard, and like we've had, I'm sure you've heard this too, especially with your groups that you've had in talking with lawyers, is that people I think got away from progressing goals, and it is easy to not do that when you are in sped forms because it just lists the objectives, right? And there isn't that piece. But you can build the template to say goal progress, right? So your teachers know that.
Well, and we've been listening to some of these things, and so there are some changes coming.
Okay,
Um, they're on the programmer's list. The programmer's list is long, right? Because we've got the whole state of Minnesota,
right,
some of South Dakota, and some of Wisconsin.
right.
And so they things are coming. Let's just go with that. Things are coming.
Nope, that's exciting. We'll tell him if he's listening, then things are coming. Yeah. So I think it'd be great to kind of talk really, I don't want to say briefly because I feel like this is a pretty extensive conversation and important about the things that Sped Forms offers, right? Outside of IEPs, evaluations, and all of those package pieces that we do as special ed teachers. There are other pieces.
Mhm.
Are out there and available on Sped Forms. And when I met with Diane earlier this week, she was telling me about the MTSS one, and I was like, wait, what? I think we know about 504 and sometimes about health plan, but it doesn't always pertain to us. But I think there are a plethora of other things that you guys offer that I would love for you to kind of speak about.
Wonderful. So, yes, while we also offer our SPED forms, and as I said, we serve all of Minnesota except for five, serve a little of Wisconsin and South Dakota. We have what we call our MA forms and services.
Mhm.
So billing MA through using SPED forms, which if you have our SPED forms and then you use our MA services as well, they just make it so much easier because that information is just flowing to the right places and to the right things. And we have two people that are in charge of our MA services, and they are amazing. Like they totally get it. And so we're now also we've offered billing services to do your billing for charter schools, but we're offering it now for anyone.
Okay.
Of course, this is another product and there's a cost to it, but that might, if you're really struggling with turnover in your MA people in your buildings or getting someone hired and then trained up, because it's a serious skill. There's a lot of complex information you need to know when you're billing through MA. You might want to talk to us. But MTSS. So back in the day, when we talked about RTI, response to intervention, we had someone that from the St. Croix River Valley Ed District that helped us develop our RTI forms. And a number of people used them at the time, but then RTI sort of faded. And special ed was saying, whoa, 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 RTI, that's general ed. That's not us. We don't need to deal with this. And so nobody was using our RTI forms and we turned them off. Well, then there was a large district that came to us and did a request for proposal, and they wanted not only SPED forms, but they wanted MA forms, they wanted health forms, and they wanted RTI forms
Mm.
or MTSS forms, as we call it now. And so we turned it back on. And but do I think it's the best? No, I don't. But just like with Sped Forms, we get better every time we get a new customer because we've got more brains working together. So at this point, we are offering MTSS services for free for a year, but asking that you then work with us on our MTSS advisory team to make it better, to
Love that.
build it, to build it differently. We've got a basis, but I we need it better.
Yeah.
And you all can help us make it better. You all could work with us to make it different. And so if people are interested in looking at it, email Diane at spedforms.com or Kelly, Kelli at spedforms.com, and we could turn it on for you as a district, and you could play in the sandbox a little bit, right, with some fake kids, and then decide, do you want to try with us to build this, if you
Yeah.
will. So we also have health forms. So nurses, with it's all been built with nurses in mind and nurses helping us. And so I think our health forms are awesome, but again, not very many, they're new. And so if you're interested, again, contact us and we'd love to have you because there's so few people using it. You would automatically be on the health forms advisory group, right? So that you can help us also reflect on it, tweak it, make it better if possible.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it does. And I love the plug for the MTSS. And we had talked about this earlier this week. And I thought that was so cool that offering it for free for a year to be part of this work group and really work through that. Because I think there's some districts that are big and house their data in expensive warehouses, which is really great that they can do that. But there are a lot of districts in Minnesota, charter and I hate calling it regular, but a regular district that are small and can't afford these data warehouses and they're housing their forms in Google and not in places I think that are as accessible, especially when we're moving kids through the process. And if they eventually become special education, I think it is a great place to keep everything together. Because I just think of when I'm looking at evaluations or going through that process, I'm like, where is the data? And it'd be so nice to have everything just kind of pulled
All
together.
in one spot.
Yes, because it's so nice when there's a 504 and you can access the 504 and everything is just streamlined together. I'm always all about that, finding it in one spot, not going to six places. So,
And I'm just gonna talk about 504 for a second. That just makes so much sense to me.
mhm,
Right now, there are a large majority of the districts in Minnesota are using our 504 forms, but those that are not are, they're in Google and they have a Google form in the elementary and a different Google form in the middle and then a different Google form in the high school, and there's no consistency.
right.
I just think, why are you doing that to yourself? The forms are simple, they're straightforward. We talk to attorneys so we know they're compliant. I I just think Google Forms makes absolute sense. And again, if you're using all of those forms are on the same platform
Mhm.
that Sped Forms is on, the due process forms, so they all work very similarly. So you don't have to learn three different systems.
Right.
504 is on the same kind of system that Sped Forms is, or special ed due process forms are, as is the MTSS forms, as is health and MA.
Yeah, easier for training. I love that. So we have about a little over 4 minutes left, but I would love in these last 4 minutes, Dan, if you could talk about your Thursdays that you guys offer, and then just quickly talk about the trainings and where we can find those. 'Cause I think there's always people asking, how do I learn more? And I said this to you previously. Districts, I think, give a small snapshot of sped forms when you're a new baby teacher coming out of college. I remember that myself back in the day, and you get that 2 hour training and they're like, here you go, go figure it out. So I think it'd be great for our listeners to hear that there is so much that you guys offer when it comes to training
Yes.
for this platform.
Absolutely. So if anybody can go to spedforms.com. So go into your browser and type in spedforms.com. It will take you to our landing page, which talks about our different services. If you scroll to the bottom of that very first page, don't change out, go down and sign up for our newsletter.
Okay.
So the newsletter comes out once a month before we have any changes, because as you know, there are changes constantly. Our programmers are always working to make the system better. So if you sign up for our newsletter, you would get that so you know what's coming the first week, Saturday of a month, which is when our traditional updates are. We promise, we will not fill your inbox with emails. If you get 4 or 5 emails from us in a month, that would be a lot. So that's the first way you can get more information about Sped Forms. Once you've logged in and you're at that landing page, you will see along the side our blog, our upcoming events. And so that will tell you what trainings we've got come up. And so we've got a bunch of free trainings this spring for 504, for MTSS, for all of the things. What we would ask is that you work as a group in a district, because all of these are virtual. They're all on Google Meet, and Google Meet only gives us 500 slots,
Yep.
right, for a training. And so if everybody in the state registered independently,
Right.
not everybody would get in. But if you register as a district or as a building, for example, and so the elementary building goes and you all sit together in a room, that's also a better way to receive training, because you've got somebody next to you listening and you're saying, what? Help me understand this. So register as a group, if you will, for all of our free trainings. They'll also tell you what conferences we're going to be at so you can see us. But then if you also go down, and we have a hamburger menu, right, on our blog, just like we do on our service or on our pages. If you go to user resources, you're going to see a lot of things there. So we've got our YouTube tutorials,
Yeah.
and we've got 140 of them. So go to the YouTube tutorials. We've got 2-minute YouTube tutorials about how do you set up a kid. We've got 2-hour tutorials about if you're a brand new special ed teacher, how do you use version 2.0.
Perfect.
So I would look through, there's a search tool. Go to playlists first and then use the search tool to find it. So if you look under playlists, you'll see 504 playlists. We just added a new one yesterday. So because we did our Thursdays at 3. And so most Thursdays at 3, there is a 1-hour discussion, if you will. We start with some slides, some new information, and we record that because not everybody can make it at Thursday at 3, and it gets put in our YouTube channel. But then we shut off the cameras and we have questions. So if, like yesterday, people had some questions about 504, they could ask questions about 504. Next Thursday at 3, we're going to talk about the April updates. And so we'll talk about what they are, what's coming, what you should know about. We record that, and then people can ask questions. We don't record the questions because people wouldn't ask questions if we were